So my name is my gamer name is Intoxable. My actual name is Ryan Reese, Reiss on the last name. I can be found in the D&D group, the Critical Role fan club, huge Critical Role fan. And anytime you guys ever have any questions or concerns about D&D, I have about 10 years of experience with DMing, so I'd love to discuss D&D with you, talk about D&D, learn a couple things. Today, as the video entitled, we are going to be talking about player types and how to handle them. So the first player type that we're going to discuss today is going to be the noob. All right, the new player. First of all, let me be the first to say there's nothing wrong with being a new player. In fact, these videos that I do for the sole purpose of bringing new people into the community, helping people feel comfortable. I in no way, shape, or form, as you can tell, put a ton of editing into my videos. I mean, I just want it to look crisp and clean and it'd be easy to follow. That's my biggest concern. But my biggest reason for doing this is because I love the community that is around this game, and I just love Dungeons and Dragons. I've been a storyteller my whole life, been all about fantasy fiction, even since I've read like the Stephen King books. It is one of my all-time favorite books. It's just amazingly written. But regardless, we're getting off topic. So the new player, the noob, never ever as a DM make a new player feel uncomfortable. You are their teacher. You are you are the person that's going to make or break this game for them. So you have a huge responsibility of making sure that they are comfortable, making sure that they understand what's going on, try to explain things in an easy way. A lot of people will look at the player's handbook like it's homework, and you don't want it to be that. You want the ability to naturally come. 3.5 was a lot harder to do that in because it had so many things you had to worry about, so many variations, so many additional things you had to focus on more than the story and role playing. Now, not saying 3.5 is bad. I played 3.5 for a very long time, but for a newer players, 5th edition is tremendously easy compared to 3.5. So I do recommend 5th edition for new players, but the biggest key elements of having a new player, make them feel comfortable. Do not force them to roleplay. Role-playing is something that a person has to get comfortable with, especially around a group of people they may not be familiar with. So allow them to get comfortable with it. Allow them to excel in their own pace, their own whatever methods they're going to use to get comfortable at the table. It may be subtle here and there, a voice, a personality quirk that comes out. Regardless of what it is, just make sure that they're comfortable. That is the number one thing you want to worry about with a new player. The next thing is make sure they understand things, explain them the best you can. Don't just refer them to the book over and over and over, because that's just going to frustrate them. Another thing that I would recommend with new players is basically, if the story allows it, try to integrate things that are going to be easier to follow, like story, antagonist, plot, finale, something along those lines. Doesn't mean that it has to be the end of the campaign. It's just something easy to start with, or an easy starter or opener. Those are primarily the things I would recommend for a new player. So with that being said, we're going to move on to a more common thing that people see, in my opinion, and that's the power gamer. Okay, the power gamer. Probably in my opinion, most often seen player type. And everybody has a little bit to a point. My years of experiencing it and even being in that boat, especially when I was younger and competitive, I get it. But as a DM, it does get quite annoying. Key things you're going to notice with power gamers, usually the first person that wants to, I'm going to investigate, and what did I find? What did I find? And they want to be they want to be the person who finds everything. And they don't, their first instinct is not going to be to share, even though it might come gradually after that. Oh, well, I can't use this. I guarantee you in the back of their mind, they're thinking, but I'll sell it and get money without even considering the other 2, 3, 4, 5, or if you're really ballsy, 6, 7, 8 other players in the campaign. They don't even think about them. And then they try to get, like, the first thing they ask for at any shop is, what kind of enchantments can I buy? What can I do to make myself more powerful? And I get it. The point of the game is to get more powerful, but you have to understand, from like level 1 through 5, don't expect to be finding a +1 to something around every corner or in every shop. I'm even guilty of offering that to players in certain aspects of past games and even current games to a point. But when your character is like super high in every stat and has like the greatest gear they can get at that level, it takes a huge chunk of the challenge out of the game. And let's be honest, that one of the biggest, funnest things in most people's opinions that aren't power gamers, let me add that in there, is having items that make them stronger but don't break the game. Because power gamers typically try to find everything they can to break the game. And that's not what you want to do. You don't want to give them game-breaking items, but they'll continue to ask for them. They'll continue to try to find them. They'll continue to say, I want to loot this guy. I want to loot that guy. How much gold can I get? How much gold can I get? Or haggle to get super low prices on everything. They don't want the game to be challenging, and or they want to be ahead of the curve in every avenue they possibly can. So most experienced DMs will tell you that the most fun part of D&D is that you can have fun with in D&D as a character is your dump stat. I mean, you could be the most uncharismatic person in the world, and you could just make it so funny. There's a guy that I play with that has a character that is a divination wizard, and he plays that character so well, and and his character's terrible. It's awful. I mean, he has I think the highest thing he has in a stat is 12, but his character is hilarious. And it also is, he's very helpful. I can't tell you how many situations he's gotten us out of a deep, dark, shitty corner. But being a power gamer, in a sense, ruins the game. And I've never really understood why people want to be the best at everything. I try to find 2 or 3 things out of hundreds that I excel at really well, but then I don't focus as much on breaking every other aspect of the game. Not even breaking the ones that I'm good at. I just want to be, mediocre. Not necessarily aggressively mediocre, but I want to be mediocre in a sense that I'm comfortable doing what I'm doing. A power gamer typically is going to do everything they can to max roll on a die. They're going to do everything they can. They're going to check every single thing they can to make sure that they're doing the maximum amount of damage they can at any given time. And I get it. You want to be strong, but when every aspect of what you do goes into that, it just, in my opinion, it labels you a power gamer. And you don't want to be super powerful all the time, because that really takes away a lot of the magic and the improv, as well as the any other aspect of surprise. If you get another thing that I notice a lot, and don't get me wrong when I say this, but I notice that the power gamers typically go for feats like Lucky. And don't get me wrong, Lucky is an amazing feat. It's probably the most powerful feat in the game. That can be argued in some aspects, but it's definitely the top 3. And I noticed that most power gamers almost always go Lucky. And that's because they know it's broken. So they want to add that to their broken power gaming arsenal. So the best way to deal with power gamers is to try to set, because we've already discussed what they are thoroughly, but the best way to deal with them is to primarily set a bar of expectation that is equal to all players. And the thing that I do with loot is I make everybody roll investigation checks, and based off of that is typically what they find. But what I also try to do is typically the things that they do find based on the roll, I try to make sure that if it's something that player can use, that player finds it. And some people may be like, well, that's bending the rules. Well, not really, because when you have a power gamer, any DM can tell you, you have to somewhat play around that. You have to play around your players. You have to play around your players' personalities. Now, a power gamer is not something that you want to kick out of a game. You just have to try to set expectations to a certain degree that keeps them within reasonable boundaries. You have to put your foot down in a lot of situations, and you have to watch them closely. You have to make sure that you don't make items too powerful. Balancing items is extremely important. Found that out the hard way when I first started DMing. Made a guy literally have like a plus 14 to hit at like level 8. It was retarded. And, I mean, you know, you learn. I have 10 years of experience and I'm still learning. I mean, I'm 33 years old. I've been playing this game since I was like 23, 22. So, at least 10 years of experience. So, just keep that in mind, that's what you got to do to handle a power gamer. So, I could go on a lot more detail, but we'll move on to the next one, which is one that I respect it to a point, but it also gets on my nerves to a point, and that is the rules lawyer. Okay, the rules lawyer. Another, what I would say, can be very annoying, but at the same time, I do respect it to a point because I always have a lot of respect for people who understand the rules, but I'm going to be the first one to tell you, in Xanathars, God bless Xanathars, there is a rule in there that basically, the number one rule indicates that the DM adjudicates the rules. So they are the final authority on everything, which most people know that, but yet you still have people who argue, and people who rules lawyer, which kind of fall into the same category. I've had every player do it to a point, and I respect being challenged. If you can show me a rule in the book, and I have not designated a house rule that supersedes that, I almost always side with the book, just because it's written text, it's easy to understand. They did a really good job in 5th edition with wording things a certain way that, in my opinion, is very close to like Magic the Gathering. The way they word cards, so many ways they word things means very specific things in the way that you can do things. So kudos to Mike Merrill and the rest of the design team for 5th edition, because they did a really good job. There's still a few spells that are open to interpretation or that don't have enough detail, but that's where the DM comes in. Now, the rules lawyer is typically never a DM, because every DM is the rules lawyer because they're the DM. But a player that is considered a rules lawyer as a player type, they're going to argue rules. They're going to argue with you that they don't think that something should happen because blah, blah, blah. I had, I'm not giving names, but I had a player that rolled 1 higher than I did on a insight check and just thought that he should automatically know every single thing about that person regardless. And I was like, well, that's not really how I do it. The way that I feel it works is the higher above them you roll, the more details you find out. It's not like a climb check where if you succeed the DC, you climb it successfully. Insight, in my opinion, or even intimidation, things like that, how far over the other person determines how scared or how insightful or what kind of information you gather from them. A lot of DMs do it that way. I know Matthew Mercer does it that way. But that player just thought that he should automatically get the other player to give him all of his money because he, persuaded him and he rolled like a few higher. And I'm like, that's not really how it works. A person's not going to give up all intelligence and reserves just because you beat them in a roll. Now, would it gear them more towards being okay with something or being on board with what your thought process? Absolutely. But it's not just going to, disrobe them and rob them blindly of their own personality and their own reserves. So, rules lawyer, that's one aspect of a rules lawyer. Another aspect is somebody who tells a player they can't do something. I have tons of players who do this to a point, and what I really want to say is just shut up. I'm the DM, or you're the DM, whatever the circumstance is. If you've already told somebody something, then a player doesn't need to come over the top of you and re-explain it or try to explain it in their own words. It's already been explained. I have players do that a lot. I have Another player that, and I mean, I love all my players, don't get me wrong, but I have another player that anytime I try to say something doesn't happen to a certain degree against him, he'll argue rules that, no, this should do more to me, or this should do that to me. And I'm like, why don't you just take what I gave you? I mean, no, I should have fell in the lava. Trust me, bro. You don't want to fall in lava. Not in 5th edition. So, I typically just have to cut them off. You have to put your foot down in situations like that. So the best way to handle rules lawyers is to back up the fact that you are the DM, refer them to the Xanathar's Guide. The DM actually dictates the rules. And another thing is always respect the fact that they might be challenging you, because they could be right. I mean, I have a pretty good grasp of knowledge on the game, but I'm still wrong sometimes. And if you have a rule that backs it up, then I am willing to either work with the player on it or just follow the book. However, more often than not, rules lawyers are a little too hardcore about the rules, and they kind of just need to relax and just play the game. So the best way to handle them is to refer to the book in a sense, but at the same time, let them know that you are the final authority no matter what the book says. The book's guidelines. There's nothing in D&D that says you have to follow the books. So reiterate that with them. Let them know you are the final word. If they can't respect that or get behind that, then they may not be the game for them. It may not be the group for them. But don't back down from your players as a DM, because you show weakness. You give them an inch, they're going to take a mile, so to speak. So yeah, just stick to the rules the best you can. Make sure people know your house rules before you start the game, unless it's one that you have to generate. In that case, they're just going to have to respect that, because it's your barbecue and they're welcome to have a plate. But be nice about it. Be respectful about it. But at the same time, try to wean them off of doing that and just let them know this is how you do it. And that usually calms them down. And if not, again, they can either, if they enjoy playing in it, you just have to try to swing with the punches. Otherwise, they just need to find another game. With that being said, we're going to move on to the next player type, which is kind of similar to... it's kind of an aspect of what I consider more hardcore players, because I consider myself a player that's pretty hardcore and gets into it. So we're going to discuss the role player. The role player. Without a doubt, my favorite player type to have in my games, because I also enjoy roleplay. I like getting into my characters. I like pretending like I'm that person. Sometimes in games, it's hard for me to break character. Now, I mean, I do break characters to pop jokes, or sometimes to get an explanation of what somebody means character-wise, but I never let it influence my character. So typically, role players are, and not to say that they're not a combination of everything we've discussed, because players can be multiple types, but usually they're very strong in one type more than others. But the role player is typically going to be somebody who gets very into the story, very into the character, might even tear up at certain aspects, and I think that's awesome that a person can get that emotionally attached to a game. You have people that are rude players that make fun of that, or give people crap for it, or just like to ruin everything. Usually, in my experience, those are people who are kind of insecure in their own lives, or basically just don't want people to look at them like they're nerds or stupid or idiots. But honestly, we're getting to the point in this day and age where that stuff is a thing of the past, and all the nerds are ruling the world. And the Dungeons and Dragons has more people playing it now than ever in the history of the game. There's all kinds of announcements from Hasbro right now about that, and I think a lot of that is to do with the easiness of 5th edition, as well as Critical Role and other D&D streaming shows that do a really good job, like Dice Camera Action or Adventure Time, stuff like that. There's some really good ones out there. Really talented people. I mean, Chris Perkins is another ungodly DM. He's one of the best storytellers I've ever seen. So basically, the role player is somebody who gets into the story, stays in character, usually attaches a voice to their character. And I like when players do that, because it's a lot easier to know when they're talking to me as a DM and than talking to me as a player in a sense of, or other players and what they're doing, or just role playing, talking. So the best way for role players is just feed them. Feed them it's not a negative player type in my opinion. Feed them content, feed them story, let them get into it, give them time to role play. Do not force a player out of role playing, no matter how dorky it might seem or how badly they're doing it. The only way they're going to get good at it is to do it better. And plus, how bad somebody role plays to a point is an opinion. So, there are some people that are just terrible at it, but if they do it, they enjoy it, let them do it. As a DM, there's a lot of times where you're just going to pop some popcorn and watch. You're not involved in every single aspect. The players need to be involved with each other. They need to role play things out. They need to do things. I like to role play shopkeeps. I have a book filled with NPCs that I use. I have some that are. I have one a magic shop called Twiddlefoot's Magical Items, and his name is Bobo Twiddlefoot, and at your service, of course. And then you have other ones like the name's Bobby Diamond. Welcome to my armory. You role play the character. You can have older women like, Melvin, get in here. It's those adventurers again. Oh crap, not them again. I know, Melvin, I know. So that's, having voices, getting into characters, it's fun. You have a good time with it. I have a character that I play that is a lizard folk wizard, primarily ice spells. So he's a lizard wizard of the blizzard. And his name is Ariak of the blizzard. And he talks like this. And I pretty much, when I'm playing it, stay in character, like the entire time. I love it. I enjoy it. It's one of those things where I would consider myself a pretty hardcore role player as a player type. Being a DM and having experience and knowledge of what to do with the different types of players, I generally am able to control how much I do those other player types. Just because I know how hard it is for a DM to control them sometimes. So I try to be as attentive and physically, actually charismatic towards the DM because I know how it is. I know how hard it is. I know how much work they have to put into it. A lot of people don't know how much work a DM puts into it or how to appreciate it. So, the best way to deal with role players is to feed them content, feed them role-playing scenarios, interact with them, role-play back with them. One thing you don't ever want to do as a DM is scare your players away from role-playing if they want to. Don't force them to. Never force a player to roleplay. They will do it at their own degree when they can. Kind of just do what they do. So if they roleplay and it makes them uncomfortable for you not to roleplay, roleplay. If it makes them uncomfortable, vice versa, then if it makes them uncomfortable, don't roleplay. But generally, I roleplay in everything, whether the player wants to or not. It's just who I am. I love the creativity. I love pretending to be other characters. So, like I said, the best way to deal with them, which is, it's not a negative thing, is to feed them content, role play with them, and give them plenty of room to grow in their role-playing experience. That's pretty much all we need to cover on that topic. So we're going to move on to what I consider a player type is the shy gamer. All right, the shy gamer. So, I think everybody to a point, especially in a new group, is going to be a little bit shy about getting into the game or even, understanding and learning how other people play. The easiest thing, like I said, you're going to notice shyness because they won't participate very much. They won't explain their character. They won't role play. They won't do a lot of things. If they're new to the game, especially, or they're new to the group, give them a week or so to kind of get acclimated to the players and the situation. Try to involve them, but don't go overboard or try to go off of their body language because that's primarily all you're going to get from a shy person. But you have to let a player get comfortable. Don't force them into the scenario. You're going to notice shy gamers not talking very much, not participating very much, not because they don't want to, just because they're shy. Try to sway them over, I should say, to participate and play and get them more comfortable with each other. And before you know it, you'll have a group of players that like to laugh together, adventure together, role play together, hopefully. But that's what D&D is all about. It's about bringing people together. It's about bringing communities together and having a good time with the greatest game ever made. So, like I said, the best thing to do to deal with shy gamers is to try to involve them. Don't force them. Gradually work with them, and before you know it, they'll be more comfortable in the setting, and you're the reason why, and the other players are the reason why. That's primarily a pretty easy one and a pretty often gamer type, but it's usually in a combination of others. But the next thing we're going to move on to is another very common, and everybody does it to a degree, but we're going to talk about the meta gamer. Okay, so the metagamer. Yeah. Oh, it's over here. The metagamer. So, more often than not, a player is going to metagame. And some people do it minimally, which is expected. Others do it hardcore or all the time. I'm going to give you some examples because sometimes metagaming in D&D can be a little confusing. Discussing something with another person on a personal level that influences a decision you're about to make, everybody does that to a degree, and I allow it to a point. But the type of metagaming that I do not allow, and that as a DM, some DMs don't care, and that's fine. But me personally, and what I consider to be an actual meta player or metagamer type, is when somebody hears something as a player that allows it to influence the decision they make with their character, whether their character was influenced to it or not. So an example of this is, let's say player A is discussing something with player B in character. Player C is nowhere to be found, but he's listening, the actual player, not the character, but the player is listening to player A and player B role play together as their characters. Well, player C then decides to do something to influence what they were discussing in character. That is metagaming. And that is metagaming to the degree that you do not want to do it, no matter how hard it is. And sometimes it's very hard to separate reality from the game. But if you don't, you're going to be labeled as somebody who metagames a lot. And being called a metagamer in a hardcore D&D group is like one of the worst things you could be called, aside from maybe a cheater. Which we'll discuss. But the metagamer that's a perfect example of metagaming, and I have situations that happen all the time. I've had players try to steal from another player, and the player's character didn't realize that they did it. Then they start making all these different decisions like, well, I've never really trusted that person, so I'm going to keep my eye on him, or I'm going to check his stuff for my stuff. No, that's not really how it works, and it's not fair to the other player. Now, keep in mind, I don't allow, in my campaigns, unless it's everybody's evil, I don't allow evil in my campaign, like an evil player. Not to say that I won't let them gradually get there in a backstory or become that way, but I don't allow evil players to start with good players. It's just not something that I do, because unless you have a very experienced group or somebody who can roleplay really well, that's just going to cause problems, drama you don't want to deal with. But an example of an actual metagaming situation was a player stole from another player because that player had just joined the group and he didn't know him. So he more or less went up there and stole something from him. And the other player basically woke up because of a circumstance and caught him. Well, as soon as that player got caught, he said, you know what, this is kind of messed up. We'll discuss this later. We'll deal with it later. For now, we need to focus on these people that are attacking us right now. Well, as soon as the fight starts, the other player hunter's marks the one that he stole from. Now, I get it to a degree, but that's also kind of teetering on the whole, well, I'm going to attack him the second this fight's over, so I'm just going to have my hunter's mark ready to go on him. I get it to a point. That, to me, that's not super metagaming, but that is teetering on a slippery slope of metagaming. Another And that would be a small example, and not necessarily that doesn't necessarily make you a meta player. That just means that you metagamed in that aspect to a point. Another situation was somebody had successfully pickpocketed a key item from somebody else because they needed it more than the other person, and the other person just wasn't giving it up. Well, that person did not detect that they pickpocketed them, but the player knew, and because of that, he started treating the other player like crap the entire time. And to me, in character, and to me, you gotta separate them. You can't let something that somebody does in game in a pretend world with a pretend character make you be rude to them or dictate what they do or how they influence with that player unless their character knows. A lot of people have a hard time separating that. I typically don't. The only time that I might meta is my opinion on something, which it might be an opinion based off of my character's opinion, but he doesn't act on it, or he doesn't physically do it, because I know that's not how the game works, and I don't want to be labeled that. And I don't want to be... I don't want to be... I don't even want to be around the metagaming aspect of it, because to me, metagaming a lot of times ruins the game. Doing it in preparation to a fight's fine. People discussing what they should do, to a degree, is fine. You do have to cut it off after a while. It's like, okay, this isn't realistic. You guys need to discuss what you're going to do in character, or just figure out what you're going to do in character. So you have players like that all the time. Players that will egg other players on, meta-wise. That they'll do their character will do things to the other character that they normally wouldn't do because they disagree with the actual person, or they dislike the actual person. And to me, it's funny once and again, but when it's non-stop, or every circumstance that an item is found or gold is found, it kind of ruins the game for the other players, and I generally kind of try to lean them out of that avenue. Sometimes it's very difficult because sometimes personalities just clash. I try to, be open and optimistic about things. I am blessed with a sunny disposition, and most people seem to like it. But the best way to deal with metagamers is to, again, put your foot down, say, hey, keep it in game. Or, hey, your character would not necessarily know that, so I'm not going to really allow you to do that in that aspect. You can definitely be more aware of your surroundings in the future around the whole group, not just the one person who successfully got away with it, unless your character was able to detect something. That usually works pretty well, but then you have people who metagame all the time, make decisions all the time, play practical jokes on people. It's like, I like from the show New Girl, whenever they put juice in Winston's shoe, well, then he went and registered him as a sex offender. I mean, you gotta kind of keep the joke levels equal to each other, because if you don't, you're gonna start having a lot of issues with that, and that's really the only way you can deal with metagamers, is to try to cut it off and or explain to them politely why their character would not be able to do that, because you've got to be able to separate both, or you're not technically playing Dungeons and Dragons. And most people are going to be pretty okay with that. The next thing we're going to move on to is not as often seen, and usually if it is seen, it's a mixture of like power gamer, or just in general its own thing, or maybe a competitive player, and that is the cheater. The cheater. So, whether you grew up with Game Genie, or just never having the skill to play a game the way it's meant to be played, and again, I can be reasonable. You beat a game naturally, go ahead and cheat. Have fun with it. Sometimes cheats are really funny. They're really fun. And they do not have any place in Dungeons and Dragons. That is the one thing that I have the least amount of patience with. From fudging rolls to pretending that you have more stuff than you do, or adding more stuff than you do, adding additional gold. There is a level of responsibility that you must take as a player that makes it much easier on the DM. We have so many things to keep track of. We cannot babysit your bag, babysit your gold. People who add things to their stuff, that's one thing that I have little patience with. My biggest patience thing is somebody who like basically fakes their dice rolls, whether they add something to it more than they should or they change what the dice rolled. Now, as the DM, some DMs do that to support the narrative, and that's up to them to do it. That's why you have a DM screen. It's not to say that it's fair to cheat the players, and you shouldn't do that as a DM, but if it supports the narrative and it's not in a combat scenario, every DM has done that to a point. I don't care who you are. Or you became less tight about a specific thing. But as a player, you need to roll where everybody can see it. You need to, especially in a situation where you're competing against another player for something, you need to make sure that you are adding modifiers correctly. If you're not sure, ask. But don't assume something is good. Don't lose track of your spell slots. Don't add extra spell slots. If you don't know, you always need to round down in the scenario. So if you think you had 2 spell slots but you're not positive, go to 1. Whatever you need to do not to be labeled as a cheater. As in my games, I will warn you once, which is more than you should get. And at that point, if you do it again and you're caught doing it again, you're done. In my group, at least for a while until I feel you've learned your lesson. I do not have any patience for it. I think it happens a lot more often with power gaming when people are like, "Oh man, I'm 1 from hitting. Hey, maybe I'll just add that 1 and nobody will ever know." Yeah, I got a 16. 16 to hit, right? Yeah, it's 16 to hit. Okay, great. I hit. So, another way to figure this out, even without looking at rolls, because sometimes you can't see them from where you're standing necessarily, depending on the table setup you have, is when the person just seems to never roll lower than like a 16. And the statistics of rolling a d20 that many times, you have a 5% chance of hitting any one number. So if you are hitting 16, 17, 18, 19, or natural 20 plus your modifier all the time, chances are you're full of shit to a degree. I've seen some super lucky things. I'm not saying that every player that's ever done that is full of shit. Another thing that I do with players, I either do point buy or I make them roll their stats in front of me, which I think every DM should really, if you're going to do stat rolls, it needs to be done in front of the DM. It's too easy for a player to go, "Oh, I'll just add 1 to it." That's not going to hurt anybody. And you do whatever they can to justify it in their head. Another thing I notice a lot is a player will sometimes act negatively against themselves later on to try to deal with the conscience or greed of the fact that they're cheating in other areas. You pick up a lot when you've DM'd as long as I have. I can tell you as a player, I have never fudged a roll in my entire 10 years because I think it ruins the game. I think it's stupid that I'm not saying that I might not have accidentally added something or I would have accidentally added something or something like that. That happens. That's not cheating. That's more ignorant than anything else. And there's nothing wrong with being ignorant in D&D. Everybody's ignorant to something to a degree. But knowingly altering a number is cheating. I don't care how you swing it. I don't care how you feel about it. I do not have any patience for it. I make all my players sit at one table. I make all my players roll in dice trays designated. And it's something that I feel I've noticed players doing, but unless I have hard proof that they're doing something, or they have a very good story to back it up, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt to a point. But my patience is very thin with cheating. I think fudging rolls is stupid. I think it's a dumb thing to do in D&D because the dice control the narrative, and if that situation rolled a 1, then sorry, they rolled a 1. Everybody rolls 1s. Everybody fails things. No matter how good you are at it, you can still fail. I think it's very important that you make a cheater well aware that you are not going to deal with that. And if they do it a second time, or even the first time, I mean, they shouldn't be cheating, period. It depends on how you want to be. But kick them out of the game. If they can't not cheat, they don't need to be playing the game. They need to be playing like Mario Brothers with Game Genie or something that they can easily manipulate and beat if that's the way they feel about video games or board games or D&D. But one thing I will suggest, talk to them about it in private first. Don't call them out during. It's not like it's not a democracy. You don't. The other players don't need to influence what it is. If another player comes to you and says, "Hey, I think such and such is doing this," keep a closer eye on it in the future. And when you notice it, say, "Hey, I noticed you've been doing such and such. You need to stop." It's just not something that I'm ever gonna be okay with. It ruins the game. It defeats the entire purpose of the game. You're just sometimes not going to successfully do something, and you're just going to have to fight that pride to not do it. I mean, honestly, cheating in D&D kind of disgusts me to a point, as if you couldn't tell. But just don't do it. I mean, there's no reason to cheat in the game. It's a game. It's fun. Fudging rolls can have very fun aspects. If you fudge a death saving throw, sorry, bro. I mean, if you fail a death saving throw, don't fudge a death saving throw. If you fail a death saving throw, sorry, it was just your time to go. Dying in D&D is a very real part of D&D. It's very hard to fully die in 5th edition, which I think they need to make it less hard to die in 5th edition, because death is really the only avenue of fear that you have in a game that makes you make decisions. Otherwise, it's like playing poker with no money. Like, who cares how many damn Skittles you lose to the other player? Diabetic anyway, you shouldn't be eating Skittles. No, but on a serious note, don't fudge rolls. Don't cheat. It ruins the game for everyone. It's not fair to everyone, especially when the situation's against them. The dice decide everything. The DM sets the expectation. The dice carry it out. That's how D&D works. Other than that, I mean, that's really all I can go into it. Don't necessarily call them out in person the first time. Call them out in private. Then discuss it with them, find out what's going on. Maybe it's something personal in their life that you don't know about. Maybe they were, always picked last in kickball, or, always did this, and they're trying to impress everyone. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean, that doesn't make it okay at all, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not coming from a good place. And in that case, realize that and try to work with them. I would give them at least one chance not to do it again. And if they do, then say, sorry, man, you were warned. You're not going to play in this campaign anymore. We'll see how you can do next campaign with it, and we'll go from there. If you're going to have a personal vendetta against me, okay, sorry. I'm not going to allow cheating in my game. Simple as that. As dreary as that player type was, we're going to move on to one that kind of irks me, because why are you playing D&D if you're this type of player? And that's the less than enthusiastic player. Sorry, the less than enthusiastic player, or the lazy player, to summarize it. Everybody has their bad days, and I get that. Everybody's tired sometimes, and you want to play. I get that. When you're like this 90% of the game, yes, oh yeah, yes, oh yeah. Oh, what's going on? How much damage do I take? Okay. Don't even care what happened. I'm on level 7, so just let me know when it's my turn again. Okay, so that shit gets on my nerves. I'm not going to be one of those people that says, you can't bring your cell phone to the game, because I'm not your daddy, and I'm not your boss outside of D&D as a DM. And technically, I'm not really your boss. I'm the word of reason and the avenue of choice. Or the guide of direction, whatever you want to call it. But what's the point of being involved in a campaign if you're just going to have your face buried in your damn phone the whole time? I mean, it's not going to kill you to take 2, 3, 4 hours out of your day with your friends. If you're using your phone for D&D stuff, like your spell list, D&D Beyond, which is amazing, I might add, then okay, that's fine. I'm not putting you in that category. But when you're falling asleep at the table, or you know, face stuck in your phone, or face stuck in a bowl, or a bowl of food, not paying attention to anything, never listening to the story, never paying attention, constantly asking questions, I'm not the type of person that's going to be like, well, you just don't know what happens, because that's not true in the character aspect. Just because the player's not paying attention doesn't mean the character's not. However, it will annoy the shit out of me, and it will make me less likely to invite you the next time I have a campaign, which anybody can tell you it's really hard to find a campaign with a good DM or a decent DM and players that show up. It's becoming easier, but it can be very difficult. I DM 3 campaigns, and I play in 2. So D&D is a huge part of my life, as you can tell from all the stuff behind me. But just don't play if you're not going to pay attention to a degree. I get it, everybody gets distracted. Everybody, might miss something. That's fine. But when you're asking what's going on every single time something happens, or your face is stuck in your damn phone, or whatever else, do things that are going to limit that. As a player, be respectful. The DMs put a lot of work into their campaign, most of them. So give them the respect of paying attention and playing. Enjoy it. Hang out with your friends. You don't need to text people. Your friends are right here. You got plenty of people to socialize with, whether it's in character or out of character. Which, to a degree, try to keep the out of character chat to a limitation, or quieter. Because it's not fair to the other players that are trying to pay attention to what's going on when you're talking across the table or talking over each other. So that's a lazy player, a less enthusiastic player. The best way to deal with a lazy player in that aspect is to talk to them in a personal level outside of the game. Be like, hey man, are you not liking the story? What's going on? Figure out what's going on. If it's a personal matter, be like, okay, I understand that, that's fine. But if every time they're coming over there's a personal matter, they've got some serious inconsistencies in their life, and they need to focus on that instead of playing D&D. I have a lot of respect for people who put aside entertainment and games to deal with their personal life, because some people can't separate the two. They even though they got a lot of stuff going on that they need to handle, they decide to play games because it's easier to immerse yourself in a fake reality than it is in your true reality. Most people play games and stuff like that to escape reality. So I get it. But be respectful to the other players at the table and the DM, because they put a lot of work into this. I personally put tons of work into it. I prepare probably 2 or 3 hours each campaign, but in preparation of story and everything else, I put, from beginning to end, probably hundreds of hours. And I think that's probably similar to most DMs out there. Don't overplan DMs, but plan enough that you have directions and things that you can do. At any given time for one session that's anywhere from 4 to 6 hours with my groups, I have at least 4 or 5 maps of where they might go. A big part of D&D is improv, so you got to do that. But back on topic, the lazy gamer, take them aside, discuss it with them, find out what's going on, see if there's something personal, try to work with them on it, see if it improves. If they just continue to do it, I don't really think it's a reason to kick them out, because they're not paying attention, which is rude. They're making other players repeat themselves, which is also kind of inconsiderate and rude. But they're not excuse me, they're not steamrolling your game. So they're just lazy or unenthusiastic, which sucks. But just remember that next time. So on the next campaign, don't invite them back. And when they say, hey, how come I can't come play? I was like, well, don't you have all kinds of games on your cell phone that you could be playing? Or why do you want to come back? You caught maybe a quarter of the entire story. But I get it to a degree, but it needs to be kept within reason. And that's the best way to deal with that. It's really the only way to deal with that. Some people are just lazy, some people are just selfish, some people are just not enthusiastic about D&D, even though for whatever reason they want to play it. Maybe they just want to be around their friends. But there's easier ways to do that don't inconvenience everyone involved. So that's primarily all we're going to discuss on that. The last player type that we're going to discuss today, who's the one that everybody hates, and that's the troll. Hey, what you doing there, boy? Oh, counting some gold? Be a shame if something happened to it. All right, so the troll. Okay, so for whatever reason, more often than not, and sometimes in everybody, usually in a joking manner, but for the ones it's not, for whatever reason, there's some people who just want to watch the metaphorical world burn. And that's the troll. There's absolutely no reason why a player should intentionally ruin fun for other people. That typically only, when it's all the time or in general, that's typically only means like one, two, or three, or all three things. The first one, they're just a dick. The second one, they have a shitty life, so the way that they deal with it is making everybody else's life around them shitty. Or another avenue, which is a little bit more sad, is that they're depressed, and the only way that they can deal with their depression is to drag other people down. But a troll and a cheater, I would say, are the two worst player types you can have. And I mean, I've had players that just intentionally ruin other people's fun, and that just gets on my damn nerves. This game is supposed to be fun, so stop being a troll. In most cases, the only way to deal with a troll is warn them once, maybe twice, and then they're gone. Once a dick, almost always a dick. People who have to control not being a dick in D&D, not only is that a little sad, but it's also, not fair to the other players if they're going to just intentionally ruin the game. Situations of this is just somebody who just the entire time just gives another player shit nonstop, messes with them nonstop, ruins everything for them nonstop, makes fun of them nonstop. We're not in high school. I mean, maybe some players are, but you need to try to, for the most part, handle that shit. I mean, I know kids in high school that have, that are more mature than that. So yeah, just don't do it. Just don't be a troll. Because if you're a troll and you ask for some toes, you're going to eat them rows. Yeah, okay, so don't really know what that was. But regardless, don't be a troll. Don't be a dick. Just have fun with the game and enjoy it. And I mean, that's really the only ways you can deal with trolls. So that's pretty much it. That's the primary player types that you're going to encounter in D&D. There's other variations that you might discover over time, but I went over the primary ones, the ones that I've seen a lot in 10 years. I hope this was educational to you guys. I hope it was great. I would really like for you to hit that subscribe button. I would like for you to comment if you think there's anything I could have done better, if you think there's anything you didn't like, if you have opinions. I'd love to hear them. Just try to be respectful with your opinions. I mean, everybody has an opinion, but you don't have to be rude about it. Everybody can have a very mature conversation about things. But don't be a troll. But regardless, just playing a game together, enjoy it, have fun, bring new people. My whole reason for this is to bring new people into the game. I love D&D, and I want everybody to experience that. I want new DMs to be perfectly comfortable. I'm going to do everything I can with these videos to help players and help DMs adjust and learn. And again, like I said, the name is Ryan, last name is Reese. If you want to message me on Facebook, I'm in the Critical Role Fan Club. I'm in the D&D 5th edition group. If you want to talk with me, message me. I'll be more than happy to make time to talk with you about anything you might want. There's people out there that already have, and I hope that I was very helpful in what I helped them with. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope this was, fun as well as educational. We'll see you later.